I want you to think for just a second about the absolute best boss you have ever had.
Oh, that's a good place to start.
Right. Just picture them in your mind. Think about, how you felt walking into work on a Tuesday morning when you knew they were the one running the floor.
You usually feel pretty light, right? Like ready to go.
Exactly. Think about the level of autonomy you had, the lack of anxiety, the way you actually felt, I mean, dare I say it, excited to tackle a difficult problem.
Yeah, that's the dream scenario.
It really is. Now, I want you to completely erase that image and picture the absolute worst boss you've ever had.
Oof. See, that usually triggers a much faster, much more visceral reaction for
Oh,
people.
absolutely. I mean, notice the physical difference in your body right now, just thinking about
Yeah,
them.
the tension.
Right. The knot forming in your stomach, the slight tightening of your shoulders. You probably remember the Sunday scaries where your weekend was completely ruined by like 4 p.m. on Sunday because you were just dreading Monday morning.
It's awful. It really takes a physical toll.
It does. And when we experience that massive life-altering difference between a good boss and a bad boss, what are we actually experiencing? Most of us, we tend to chalk it up to personality.
Right, we say things like, oh, Susan was just a natural leader.
Exactly. Or Greg was just a toxic person.
Yeah.
We treat leadership like this magical aura that you're either born with or you just aren't.
Which is such a limiting way to look at it.
It really is. Because what if we are completely wrong about that? What if you weren't experiencing a difference in soul or personality, but simply the difference between someone who lacked a specific, highly structured set of mechanics and someone who had mastered them?
And that completely reframes the entire concept of the workplace. I mean, when you stop looking at leadership as an inherent mystical trait and start looking at it as an analytical discipline, everything changes.
It's a skill, right?
Exactly. It becomes something you can dissect, measure, and, most importantly, replicate. It's almost binary when you look under the hood. The system is either functioning smoothly because the right levers are being pulled, or it's breaking down because the operator just doesn't know how the machine works.
And that, my teen, is exactly what we are going to reverse engineer today. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are exploring some incredibly profound concepts drawn from a comprehensive analysis of management mechanics.
Specifically, looking at the frameworks laid out by Dr. Essam Abdel Latif.
Right. In his 2015 book, Skills of the Effective Manager and Marketing Skills, our mission today is to extract the ultimate ground-up blueprint of leadership from this text.
And we aren't just going to give you a list of how to give orders effectively.
No, we're going way deeper than that.
We're going deep into the psychology of decision-making, the day-to-day tactical execution on the floor, and, well, this is the part that completely blew my mind.
Oh, me too.
The actual, tangible, macro-societal impact of truly effective management.
Yeah, we'll get to that later, but that societal impact is basically the ultimate destination of this entire framework. The core argument we are exploring is that management is a deeply analytical science.
Right. When it is systematically applied, it doesn't just make a single cubicle more pleasant. I mean, it serves as the foundational engine for an entire economy.
It's incredibly relevant because, honestly, every single person listening to this right now is caught in this web. You are either managing a team or you report to a manager.
Unless you live completely off the grid in a cabin somewhere.
Right, exactly. So let's jump right into the architecture of this. Before we even get into the weeds of how a manager behaves during a crisis on a Wednesday afternoon, we have to look at the genesis point.
How they chosen in the first place.
Yes. So imagine you are a founder. You've poured your life savings, your sweat, your tears into building a business. Now it's grown to the point where you simply cannot run it alone.
You're stretched too thin.
Way too thin. You need to hire someone to run the daily operations from A to Z. So you put out an ad, you get a massive stack of resumes, and you sit down in the interview room. How do you actually spot the right person?
It's terrifying.
It is, but the text provides a very rigorous 9-point diagnostic checklist for exactly this.
And we need to clarify right away what this checklist actually represents. It is not just a list of technical competencies.
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you are a founder handing over the keys to your project, you are essentially handing over your livelihood and the livelihoods of all your employees.
The stakes are huge.
Right. Therefore, this checklist is fundamentally an exercise in intense risk mitigation. You are looking for a psychological profile that can carry immense weight without collapsing.
And without constantly handing that weight back to you, the owner.
Exactly.
So let's break these traits down organically because they seem to fall into these distinct operational buckets. Let's look at the first bucket, which is all about autonomy and trust.
Okay, sounds good.
The very first trait on the checklist is that the ideal candidate must be inherently self-motivated. They don't need their hand held.
No, they definitely don't.
They can execute complex tasks without running back to the founder for every minor clarification.
And think about this from the perspective of operational drag. I mean, if a manager constantly requires the owner's input to make small day-to-day decisions, what is actually happening?
They aren't really managing.
Exactly. They are functioning as a highly compensated administrative assistant, or, a very expensive messenger pigeon.
A messenger pigeon. I like that.
A self-motivated manager possesses an internal locus of control. They understand the macro goals of the business, and they have the internal drive to push the project toward those goals autonomously.
So they don't need a cheerleader.
No, and they certainly don't need a babysitter.
Which, frankly, is the only way the founder actually gets their time back to focus on growing the business rather than just sustaining it. And that leads perfectly into another trait in this autonomy bucket, which is reliability.
Sounds basic, right?
It does sound basic, meeting deadlines, not procrastinating. But the framework emphasizes the willingness to absorb pressure, staying late or driving into the trenches without hesitation when the structural integrity of the business requires it.
It sounds basic, yeah, but it is the bedrock of trust. Reliability in a manager is the operational baseline. I mean, an owner needs to sleep at night.
Oh, for sure.
They need to know that when an inevitable crisis hits at, say, 4:55 p.m. on a Friday, this manager isn't just going to look at their watch, clock out, and let the ship take on water over the weekend.
And that sleep at night factor brings us to what I think is the most difficult trait to actually test for: integrity and trustworthiness.
Yeah, that's a tough one to measure.
Right. Now, I love the practical reality of this point in the text. You can't just slide across the interview table, look someone in the eye, and ask, so, are you an honest person?
Because literally every human being on Earth will say yes to that question.
Exactly. Who's going to say no?
No one. Integrity isn't declared, it is demonstrated engaged. True trustworthiness in a management context is defined by the absence of anxiety in the delegator.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. The absence of anxiety.
Yeah, it's a felt sense of operational security. If you hire someone and you find yourself constantly double-checking their spreadsheets, or quietly monitoring their emails, or lying awake wondering if they are cutting ethical corners to hit a target, they lack this fundamental trait.
So it doesn't matter how good their resume is.
Right. Regardless of how stellar their resume looks or how high their sales numbers are, if they generate anxiety in the leadership above them, they are failing the integrity test.
So we have this first bucket, a self-motivated, reliable, high-integrity operator. But the next grouping of traits is where it gets really fascinating to me. I call this the emotional shield bucket.
The emotional shield, I like that.
Because the framework highlights conflict resolution as an absolute necessity. The manager is the vital link between upper management and the floor staff.
They have to spot problems in their infancy and extinguish them before they mutate into structural damage.
Exactly. The ability to see a spark and put it out before it becomes a forest fire. I like to visualize this like a shock absorber in a car.
Okay, walk me through that.
So think about it. You've got this bumpy, chaotic road down below. That represents the daily staff issues, the interpersonal friction, the broken printers, the minor grievances.
Right, the everyday chaos.
Yeah. And then you have the heavy, rigid chassis of the car above. That represents upper management, the board of directors, the demanding investors with their rigid expectations.
Makes sense.
The manager sits right in the middle of those two forces. Their entire job is to take the violent hits from the road below and the heavy pressure from the chassis above and compress it, absorb it so that the passengers in the car can just enjoy a smooth ride.
That is an exceptional analogy. Because, what happens when a shock absorber fails?
The ride gets terrible.
Worse than that. The violent kinetic energy from the road transfers directly into the chassis. The whole vehicle basically shakes itself apart.
Wow, yeah.
If a manager cannot resolve conflicts when they are small and localized, those conflicts travel up the chain, they fester, they become union disputes, they become massive HR liabilities, they become toxic culture rots.
And to be an effective shock absorber, the framework demands the next trait, which is the ability to work under immense pressure while remaining outwardly calm, a quiet, steady demeanor that actively reduces stress for everyone else.
Which is incredibly hard to maintain.
It is, but I have to throw a red flag here and push back on the very next trait on the list, which is optimism and positivity.
Ah,
The
yes.
blueprint literally dictates that this ideal manager should show up smiling, constantly projecting a positive atmosphere to raise morale. Let's be real for a second. Is it actually realistic or even healthy to expect a human being to take all these brutal hits from above and below, stay perfectly calm while the servers are crashing, and walk around with a giant beaming smile on their face?
It sounds a bit unhinged when you put it like that.
Doesn't it? Isn't that the exact definition of what we now call toxic positivity?
That is exactly the right question to ask. Because on the surface, it sounds like a recipe for a psychotic break.
Hmm.
But we have to dig into the underlying mechanics of what is actually being prescribed here in the text.
Okay, lay it on me.
This is not an endorsement of a fake, plastered-on smile while the building is actively burning down. Toxic positivity is the denial of reality. It's saying everything is fine when it clearly isn't, which actually gaslights employees and increases their stress.
Right, no one likes being lied to.
Exactly. What we are talking about here is the strategic deployment of optimism as a tool to lower the friction of the workplace.
Lowering friction. Unpack the mechanics of that. How does a smile actually lower operational friction?
Well, we have to look at the biology of human interaction. Humans are incredibly susceptible to emotional contagion, largely due to mirror neurons in our brains.
Oh, right. We mimic what we see.
Precisely. If a manager runs out of their office in a blind panic, snapping at people, sweating, projecting doom and gloom because a deadline was missed, the employees physically absorb that panic.
Cortisol levels spike.
Exactly. Cortisol levels spike across the entire floor. The environment becomes highly stressful. And what happens to human beings in highly stressful negative environments?
That's shut down.
Their prefrontal cortex shuts down, meaning they can't problem solve effectively, their immune systems weaken, they burn out, they start calling in sick.
Wow.
The framework explicitly links this calm, positive demeanor to reducing employee absenteeism and raising productivity.
Okay, so it's not about ignoring the fire. It's about being the calmest person in the burning building so everyone else can find the exits without trampling each other.
Exactly. It's not, oh, I'm so happy the server crashed. It is, the server crashed. This is a serious problem. But I am projecting a calm, grounded confidence that we possess the competence to fix it.
You're regulating the room.
Yes. You do this so that your engineers have the mental bandwidth and the psychological safety to actually go fix the server, rather than sitting at their desks hyperventilating about whether they are going to be fired.
That's a huge distinction.
The optimism isn't a personality quirk. It is a deliberate act of emotional regulation for the sake of the team's efficiency. It is leadership functioning as emotional infrastructure.
Leadership as emotional infrastructure. I absolutely love that. And that ties directly into another trait in this shield bucket, which is high customer service skill.
Right. But we aren't talking about just answering the phones every day.
No, the framework makes it clear that the manager steps in specifically when things go wrong with the client. They are the de-escalation specialists.
Because when a client is furious, the stakes are at their absolute highest. It's not just about saving face. It's a financial imperative.
Oh, for sure.
The framework points out that calming an angry client directly correlates to protecting and increasing revenue. If your manager can take a volatile, litigious situation, absorb that outward frustration, validate the client's anger without conceding unnecessary ground, and turn that angry client into an advocate, they are literally saving the company's bottom line in real time.
Which requires a massive amount of suppressed ego. You can't take it personally.
You really can't.
And that brings us to the final bucket of traits in our hiring blueprint: competence and ego management. The ideal manager must be a foundational team player. There is no "I did this," there is only "we did this." They check their ego at the door.
Because a manager who operates out of self-interest and ego will eventually, inevitably, cannibalize their own team.
How so?
Well, imagine a team works for 3 months on a brilliant new product, and the manager takes the prototype to the CEO and says, look at this amazing thing I built, what happens?
The team mutinies. I mean, they stop trying altogether.
Exactly. The morale plummets to absolute zero, and future productivity ceases to exist. The ideal manager understands that their own success is inextricably 100% intertwined with the success of the people reporting to them.
So they protect the team.
Yes. By fiercely protecting their team and ensuring the team gets the credit, the manager builds intense loyalty.
And finally, to protect that team, The manager needs the last trait on the list, which is deep industry knowledge.
This one is crucial.
They need to know the specific field thoroughly. You can technically train a smart person to manage a workflow, but having prior deep experience in the actual work being done is the ideal scenario, according to the text.
Because credibility is the ultimate currency of leadership. I mean, if a team of veteran structural engineers feels like their new manager doesn't know the difference between a load-bearing wall and drywall, respect erodes instantly.
Yeah, they'll just ignore you.
You could be the nicest, most emotionally intelligent person in the world, but if your team thinks you're incompetent in the core function of the business, you cannot lead them.
That makes total sense.
Deep industry knowledge allows the manager to lead with earned authority, rather than just pointing to the title on their door.
Okay, so let's say we've run the gauntlet. We've used this 9-point blueprint. We've hired the perfect, shock-absorbing, high-integrity, knowledgeable manager. They are sitting in the big chair.
They made it.
They made it. Now, we need to look inside their head. Day to day, minute to minute, a manager isn't just making binary spreadsheets balance. They are navigating the chaotic waters of human psychology.
Which is a whole different ballgame.
It is. The framework outlines a core internal toolkit. These are the mental qualities required once they are actually on the job.
And this toolkit represents a massive cognitive leap. I mean, being a great individual contributor, like a great programmer or a great salesperson, does not mean you will be a great manager.
Right.
The skills that get you promoted are often entirely different from the skills you need once you were promoted.
That's the classic mistake, isn't it? Promoting your best salesperson to sales manager, and suddenly you've lost your best closer and gained a terrible manager.
Happens all the time.
So let's look at this new cognitive toolkit. The first tool is being visionary, but the analysis makes a very specific, sharp distinction between short-term planning and long-term vision.
Yes, it does.
It argues that while short-term tactics keep the lights on, the long-term vision is paramount, even to the point of sacrificing current profits.
This is the dividing line between an administrator and a true leader. An administrator looks at the quarterly earnings report and asks, how can we squeeze 2% more profit out of this quarter to make the shareholders happy right now?
Right, short-term thinking.
They might cut the training budget or buy cheaper, lower quality materials. It boosts the margin today, but it rots the foundation. A visionary manager has the fortitude to endure the immense discomfort of short-term losses to build long-term dominance.
Give me an example of what that actually looks like in a boardroom.
Okay, so a visionary manager walks into the CEO's office and says, I'm going to intentionally decrease our profit margin by 15% this year.
The CEO would have a heart attack.
Right. But the manager says, I'm going to take that capital and invest it heavily into an intensive 6-month upskilling program for our entire engineering team. Our numbers will look worse in the short term, but in 3 years, our team will be capable of building proprietary software that our competitors cannot touch, and we will double our market share.
Wow.
That requires immense internal courage.
It really does. And that leads right into the next tools in the kit. Being an elite communicator and an empathetic listener.
You have to go hand in hand.
They do. They clearly define tasks, so there is no ambiguity. But as a listener, the framework dictates they must actively decode employee motivations, keep a radically open mind, and it specifically highlights that they must never discriminate based on race, religion, gender, or any other demographic factor.
That's explicitly stated in the text.
Now, I want to pause on that anti-discrimination point. Obviously, in the modern world, this is a legal and moral imperative. But looking at this purely through the lens of management science from the text, why is it highlighted as a core operational tool?
Because from a purely cold, analytical efficiency standpoint, discrimination is a catastrophic waste of resources.
Really? How so?
It is the ultimate form of operational self-sabotage. Imagine you are running a hospital. You have a nurse who has observed a critical flaw in how patient data is handled, a flaw that could save lives and millions in liability.
Okay.
If your management structure dismisses that nurse's idea because of their gender or their race or because they speak with an accent, the hospital absorbs a massive unnecessary loss.
Just because they didn't want to listen.
Exactly. The system remains broken because bias acted as a filter against truth. A masterful manager strips away all of those cognitive biases to hear the actual raw value of what their team is telling them.
They don't care where the idea comes from.
Right. They are aggressively mining for good ideas, and they don't care what package the idea comes in.
They are optimizing the human capital they have available. Which brings us to what I think is the most difficult terrifying tool in an entire kit.
The delegator.
The delegator. The framework sets up a massive, almost cruel psychological paradox here. It states that the manager absolutely must delegate complex tasks to build a competent team.
Yes.
But in the exact same breath, it insists that the manager retains 100% of the ultimate final responsibility for the outcome. How does a human brain process that?
It's incredibly stressful.
I keep thinking of a master gardener. You plant the seeds, you optimize the soil, you ensure there's enough water, but you can't grab the stem of a tomato plant and violently pull on it to make it grow faster.
No, you'd kill it.
Right, you have to step back and let the plant do its thing. But if the garden dies and produces no food, you can't blame the tomatoes. It's your fault.
The master gardener is the perfect metaphor for the delegation paradox. This is, without a doubt, the heaviest psychological burden of leadership. You have to surrender control of the process, but you must maintain total ownership of the consequences.
That sounds like a waking nightmare for anyone with even a little bit of anxiety.
It is. And that is exactly why bad managers micromanage.
Oh, because they can't handle the paradox?
Exactly. Micromanagement is not a sign of high standards. It is a symptom of severe managerial anxiety. They cannot handle the psychological terror of giving up control, so they hover behind their employees, dictating every single keystroke.
So they become the bottleneck.
The text is brutal on this point. If you do not delegate, you destroy the team. You become an operational bottleneck. Nothing moves faster than you can personally approve it. True delegation requires a transfer of trust.
So how do you survive the consequences if your team actually drops the ball?
You act as a shield. When you delegate, you are making a silent pact with your team.
What's the pact?
The pact is, if you succeed, I will put you on a pedestal and ensure everyone knows you did this. If you fail, I will stand between you and the wrath of the executives.
Wow, that takes guts.
When the project fails, the great manager walks into the boardroom and says, "This failure is mine. I did not provide the right resources, or I did not set the parameters clearly enough. It is my responsibility."
And that builds loyalty.
That level of self-sacrifice creates a team that will literally run through brick walls for you.
Which requires an incredibly high level of self-confidence, which is the next tool in the kit. But it's self-confidence specifically regarding the embrace of failure.
Right, not just general arrogance.
Exactly. A successful manager doesn't panic when things explode. Failure is synthesized as a data point, not an end point.
If a manager is terrified of failure, they will never, ever innovate. They will only approve safe, mediocre, iterative projects.
Embracing failure isn't about celebrating incompetence, though.
What is it about? It's about clinical resilience. It's the ability to look at a collapsed project, separate your personal ego from the wreckage, and conduct a blameless postmortem. You ask, okay, the system broke. Why did it break? And what data did we just acquire that guarantees we won't make this exact mistake next year?
Right. So wrapping up the internal toolkit, we have the motivator, the one who provides flexibility, and the master of patience.
All very important.
The motivator isn't just a cheerleader. The text says they actively set up tangible reward systems like financial bonuses or public recognition tied directly to achieving goals.
It has to be tangible.
Right. And flexibility means giving the team the target, but letting them figure out the how. And patience means dealing with highly diverse, sometimes clashing personalities calmly and actively listening to all dissenting opinions before making a final ruling.
Notice the underlying theme connecting all of these internal tools. Patience, flexibility, motivation, delegation. The manager is not the one doing the heavy lifting.
They aren't in the trenches doing the actual coding or building.
Right. The manager is the architect of the environment. They are creating the precise atmospheric conditions where the heavy lifting can be done efficiently, safely, and creatively by others.
Okay, this is the perfect moment to shift gears because the source material makes a very sharp, very deliberate pivot right here.
It really does.
Up to this exact point, we have exclusively used the word manager. But suddenly, the framework introduces the concept of leadership, and it treats them differently.
Very differently.
A manager administers processes, but a leader influences human beings. Let's break down the actual anatomy of leadership according to the text.
This is a vital semantic and operational distinction. I mean, you manage a supply chain, you manage a budget. You cannot manage a human being in the same way. You must lead them.
The text gives a general definition. It says leadership is the ability to influence others to achieve specific goals and the ability to modify the behavior of workers.
That's the baseline.
But there is a more comprehensive definition provided that I absolutely love. It defines leadership as directing a group to work in a coordinated, harmonious, and collective manner to achieve a specific goal.
The operative words there being coordinated and harmonious.
Yes.
It is not about forcing people to march in lockstep through intimidation or fear.
Mm.
Fear is a terrible long-term motivator. It only produces compliance, not excellence.
Right. People will do the bare minimum just to not get fired.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Harmonious coordination is about aligning individual human energies into a single unified vector. It is the difference between a prison guard herding inmates and a maestro conducting a symphony orchestra. Everyone's playing a different instrument, but the leader brings them into harmony.
So how do you become the maestro? The framework dissects this into 4 specific characteristics or skill categories.
Let's hear them.
Category 1 is personal and self-skills. This includes baseline intelligence, the capacity for innovation, and what they term emotional control, which links right back to the shock absorber concept we talked about.
Restraining your own psyche so it doesn't spill onto the team.
Exactly. Category 2 is technical skills, having the specialized knowledge to actually understand the work being done.
Right, the industry knowledge.
Category 3 is human and behavioral skills, the ability to interact effectively. You can be the smartest person in the building, but if you have the interpersonal skills of a cactus, you will fail to lead anyone.
Exactly. A brilliant jerk is still a liability to the organization.
Totally. And then we hit category 4. The framework lists administrative and political skills.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, I have to stop the train right here.
Okay.
Political skills. When you say political skills in the workplace, my brain immediately goes to the darkest, most toxic elements of corporate life.
Most people's brains do.
I picture Machiavellian backstabbing by the water cooler. I picture people stealing credit for other people's slide decks, whispering poison in the VP's ear, and kissing up to the boss just to claim the corporate ladder. Is this framework actually advocating that a good leader needs to be a sneaky politician?
I am so glad you pulled the emergency brake on that, because the modern connotation of office politics is universally negative.
It's the worst part of any job.
It is. But we need to define this strictly by how the analytical framework presents it, tracing back to the root concept of the word. When the author says political, they are absolutely not advocating for Game of Thrones in the break room.
Okay, thank God. So what is the actual definition here?
In this specific context, political is defined as the leader's ability to see and comprehend the overarching macro vision of the organization.
Oh, like the big picture?
Exactly. Think of the Greek root polis, meaning the city or the body of citizens. Political skill is organizational vision. It's the ability to step back and understand the incredibly complex ecosystem of the company, like how the marketing department impacts logistics, what the shareholders are demanding, where the industry is moving over the next 5 years.
So it's seeing the whole chessboard, not just your specific piece?
Precisely.
Okay, that is a massive relief. And how does that pair with the administrative half of that skill?
The framework defines administrative skill as the ability to achieve alignment. This is the true magic trick of elite leadership. It is high-level diplomacy.
Give me a scenario.
Let's play one out. The political reality of the company is that the board of directors wants to pivot the software product to incorporate AI, and they need it done in 6 months to beat a competitor.
Right, a tight deadline.
That is the macro goal. Now, you have a senior developer on your team. Their micro desire is that they are feeling stagnant, they want to learn new coding languages, and they want a clear path to a promotion.
The classic clash between what the company needs and what the employee wants.
Exactly. A bad manager just yells at the developer to work weekends to build the AI tool. But a leader with administrative skill aligns the two.
How do they do that?
They sit down with the developer and say, the company needs to pivot to AI. I know you want to learn new skills and move up. I'm going to put you in charge of researching and implementing this new AI integration. It will stretch you, but if you pull it off, you will be the resident expert, and I will have the ammunition to get you that promotion.
Oh, that's really smart.
You have just aligned the macro-organizational goal with the micro-human desire. You created a vector where the employee, by chasing their own success, automatically fulfills the company's needs. That is administrative and political skill in action.
That is brilliant. It's not about being a politician. It's about being a translator and an ambassador between the boardroom's demands and the break room's realities.
Well said.
So you have the vision, you have the toolkit, you understand the anatomy. How do you deploy this on the ground? This is where the framework introduces the choose your fighter element.
It's my favorite part.
It outlines 5 distinct models or styles of leadership. And the golden rule here is that no single style works for every situation. You have to read the room. Let's dive into the 5 styles.
As we unpack these, keep in mind that the maturity, education level, and immediate environment of the team dictate which style is required.
Right. Style number one is dictatorial leadership, the absolute centralization of power. The leader makes every single decision, micromanages the execution, and maintains total control over the group.
Sounds intense.
It does. Now, to modern ears, that sounds like a miserable place to work. Does this have any valid application today?
It sounds archaic, and as a permanent culture, it is highly destructive to morale and innovation.
I'd quit.
Most people would.
Right.
However, it absolutely has a time and a place. The classic example is an actual literal crisis.
Like an emergency.
Yes. If a fire breaks out in the warehouse, you do not want a democratic manager gathering everyone in a circle to brainstorm which fire exit aligns best with their personal values.
No, you want someone to take charge immediately.
You want a dictator pointing and screaming, drop everything and run out that door right now. In moments of extreme time sensitivity, or when dealing with highly inexperienced, untrained workers performing dangerous tasks, dictatorial leadership is a safety mechanism.
But only for the crisis.
Right. The moment the fire is out, you have to drop the style, or your best people will quit.
Which brings us to style number two, democratic leadership. This is based on participation, cooperation, and sharing opinions with the team before decisions are finalized.
This is the gold standard for most healthy, modern corporate environments. It generates massive buy-in.
Because people like to be heard.
Exactly. When employees feel they had a hand in shaping a policy or a product, they work twice as hard to ensure it succeeds, because they have psychological ownership over it.
But there's a downside, right?
There is. The trade-off, of course, is speed. Democracy is inherently slower than dictatorship. You are sacrificing velocity for consensus and morale.
Style number three is presented as a stark warning in the text, loose or laissez-faire leadership. Characterized by absenteeism, avoidance of decisions, and a predictably high rate of poor team performance.
This is the manager who wants the title and the salary, but none of the conflict.
The ghost manager.
Right. They hide in their office, they tell everyone to just figure it out, and they refuse to mediate disputes. What happens is a power vacuum forms. Without a conductor, the orchestra stops playing music and starts fighting over who gets to play the loudest.
That was just chaos.
It breeds resentment, chaos, and ultimately failure. It is the absolute abdication of duty.
Which sounds a bit similar to style number four, but the framework makes an incredibly sharp, vital distinction. Style four is free rein, or non-directed leadership.
This one is fascinating.
It is. The leader leaves decision-making entirely to the subordinates and acts merely as an advisor or a resource provider. Now, why is this different from the lazy absentee boss we just described? Because the text explicitly notes this works specifically for highly educated, highly specialized groups. It names universities and research institutions as the prime examples.
This might be the most nuanced and brilliant distinction in the entire framework. Let's zoom in on why specialized researchers are named here.
Okay.
Imagine you are the administrative director of a cutting-edge aerospace laboratory. Your team is composed of 10 PhD rocket scientists who are trying to develop a new propulsion system.
A bunch of literal geniuses.
Right. You as the manager possess maybe 5% of the quantum physics knowledge that they do.
Right. If I walk into that lab acting like a dictator, telling a literal rocket scientist which specific math equation to use.
They will mock you, and then they will leave to work for your competitor.
Yeah, that wouldn't end well.
You cannot micromanage genius. A dictatorial, or even a heavily democratic style will actively crush the unorthodox thinking required for elite innovation. In this incredibly specific environment, free rein is the only effective style.
So what does the manager actually do?
You don't tell them how to do the math. Your job is to say, the goal is to reach Mars. Here is your $10 million budget. Here are the safety parameters. I'm going to sit in my office and fight with the procurement department so you never run out of liquid nitrogen. Call me if you hit a roadblock.
You just clear the path for them.
Exactly. You step back entirely. You aren't absent. You are functioning as a protective barrier and an ultimate resource, trusting the experts to be the experts.
That is a phenomenal distinction. It is the ultimate expression of trust. And it perfectly sets up the fifth and final style, the leadership continuum.
Which is how this all comes together.
The framework argues that leadership isn't an either-or choice. You don't pick one of the four styles and print it on your business card. It is a sliding scale. On one end, strict orders. On the other end, massive freedom within a general framework.
And this is the culmination of the tactical section. You are not a static entity. You are a dynamic operator constantly reading the variables of the situation.
I picture it like a sound engineer sitting at a massive mixing board in a recording studio. You don't just flip a giant clunky switch that says dictator mode or free reign mode.
Right, there are degrees to it.
Yeah, you have all these delicate sliding faders, and you push those faders up and down continuously depending on who is in the room, what the crisis is, and what the deadline looks like.
Exactly.
If you have a brand new 22-year-old intern on their first day, you might push their specific fader slightly toward dictatorial. I mean, they need very clear, unambiguous, strict instructions because they just don't know the landscape yet.
They need structure.
Right, but for your senior systems architect who has been there for a decade, you push their fader all the way up to free reign. You just tell them the goal and get out of their way.
Exactly. And the masterful manager is adjusting that mix in real time, all day long, ensuring the team is producing the best possible harmony.
Okay, we are entering the final and, frankly, the most mind-bending section of our deep dive.
This is where it gets wild.
Up to now, we've been very micro. We've covered the internal psychology, the mixing board of styles, the daily execution. To synthesize all of this, the author provides a master checklist of 12 distinct managerial skills.
Like a summary of everything you need to be capable of doing.
Yes, I am going to read them, but I want us to look at how they interlock. Number 1, teamwork. Number 2, leading others. Number 3, delegation. Number 4, team building. Number 5, effective communication.
All making sense so far.
Number 6, training. And specifically, preparing the next generation of managers. Number 7, innovative thinking. Number 8, crisis management. Number 9, performance management. Number 10, total quality management, or TQM. Number 11, total quality in education and training. And number 12, supervision and evaluation. Because, well, if you aren't measuring the output, you were just guessing.
Let's briefly pause on number 10, total quality management, because that is a massive operational philosophy, not just a buzzword.
Unpack that for us.
For those who aren't steeped in supply chain theory, TQM is the radical idea that quality is not the responsibility of the quality assurance department at the end of the assembly line. Quality is the responsibility of every single human being in the organization, from the janitor to the CEO.
Oh, wow.
It means that if the person sweeping the floor notices a machine making a weird sound, they have the authority and the duty to pull the emergency stop cord. The manager who implements TQM is creating a culture of universal, hypervigilant ownership.
It's an incredibly rigorous, demanding checklist. I mean, if you find someone who actually embodies all 12 of these skills, you have found an absolute unicorn who will dominate any industry.
Absolutely.
But here is where the framework pulls off a pivot that I did not see coming at all. It establishes this 12-point checklist, and then
It zooms out.
it suddenly zooms way, way out, past the cubicle, past the office building, past the corporate headquarters. It connects these specific management skills to massive national macroeconomic development goals.
This is the genius of the book.
The text outlines the goals of the development plan. It lists objectives like allocating resources optimally, investing in human capital, investing in construction, providing appropriate and affordable housing, poverty reduction, and supporting scientific and technological research.
It's a huge leap in scale.
So I have to ask, I was genuinely confused reading this part. How on earth did we get from how to smile at your employees and manage office conflict to eradicating poverty and building affordable housing? This feels like a massive disconnected leap. Did the author accidentally staple the end of an economics textbook to a management guide?
I had the exact same reaction the first time I analyzed this framework.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like an absurd leap. But when you actually trace the causal mechanics of society, it is the absolute aha moment of the entire work.
Okay.
The author is pulling back the curtain to reveal the hidden architecture of how a nation's economy is actually built.
Okay. Trace that line for me. Connect the dots. How does a manager, using the democratic style to resolve a coding dispute on a Tuesday morning, eventually lead to affordable housing being built in a city?
Well, we have been culturally conditioned to think of management as a purely selfish corporate function. We think a manager's only real job is to make a single company slightly more profitable, so the CEO can buy a nicer yacht.
Right, the Wall Street stereotype.
Exactly. But that is incredibly short-sighted. On a macroeconomic level, effective managers are the literal engines of a nation's wealth. Let's trace the causal chain. Imagine a manager who actually utilizes the 12 skills. They use the delegation paradox correctly. They manage crises without burning out their staff. They implement total quality management so waste is reduced to zero. What happens to that specific company?
Well, it becomes incredibly hyper-efficient. Productivity skyrockets.
Exactly. Productivity goes up, employee turnover drops to near zero, and innovation increases. Because of this extreme efficiency, that company begins to generate a massive economic surplus.
They're making way more than they spend.
Right, they are producing more value than they are consuming. Now, take that single hyper-efficient company and multiply it. Imagine thousands of managers across an entire country, all operating with these elite frameworks, all generating economic surplus. You are now generating immense compounding national wealth.
Okay, I see the wealth generation, but how does that build a house? Or fix poverty?
What happens to that massive surplus? Corporations use it to expand. They build new factories, which requires construction workers. They hire more staff, which directly pulls people out of unemployment, thereby reducing poverty.
Okay, creating jobs.
But even more directly, surplus generates immense tax revenue. When thousands of efficiently managed companies are highly profitable, the tax base of the nation swells. What does a government do with a swelling tax base?
It funds infrastructure.
Yes. It subsidizes construction. It builds affordable housing for its citizens. It funds public works.
Oh.
It goes even deeper than that. The framework specifically highlights investing in human capital. When a manager takes the time to use patience, training, and democratic leadership to turn a novice 22-year-old employee into a master of your craft over 5 years, what have they actually done?
They've trained an expert.
They haven't just helped their company. They have literally upgraded the human capital of the entire nation. They've made the national workforce smarter, more resilient, and more capable.
I never thought of it like that.
And when a manager uses the free-rein style perfectly to manage a team of scientists, giving them the exact environment they need to discover a new medical treatment or a new energy source, they are directly, causally supporting the scientific and technological advancement of the human race.
That is staggering to wrap your head around. It takes this thing that we all complain about, middle management, and elevates it to a sacred societal function.
It truly is.
It means that the role of a manager isn't just a corporate babysitter trying to hit a KPI. They are a fundamental, load-bearing pillar of a thriving civilization. Which means the inverse is also true, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Poor management, like a toxic boss who yells, micromanages, and burns people out, isn't just an annoyance for the people in that office. It is an active economic drain on the entire country. They are destroying human capital and burning surplus value.
Precisely. If a manager acts as a dictator when they shouldn't, they crush the innovation that could have led to a breakthrough. If they're loose and lazy, they waste raw materials and human time.
And if they stress people out,
If they lack emotional control and stress their team into illness, they are burdening the healthcare system. The profound thesis of this framework is that being a good manager is not just a career skill. It is a socioeconomic duty to your society.
I am never going to look at an office building the same way again. Seriously. Let's bring this all together because we have covered an incredible amount of ground today, diving deep into the architecture provided by Dr. Essam Abdel Latif.
It's been quite a journey.
We started at the very beginning, down in the dirt, with a rigorous hiring blueprint for a single business. We learned to look for that self-motivated, high-integrity, calm, conflict-resolving shock absorber.
The foundational traits.
Right. We then moved into the mind of the manager, exploring the internal emotional regulation required to lead. We grappled with the intense psychological weight of the delegation paradox, surrendering the process while wearing the consequences.
The master gardener.
Exactly. We defined the intricate spectrum of control, learning how to adjust the mixing board from the emergency dictator all the way to the hands-off, resource-providing advisor of rocket scientists.
Adjusting those faders all day long.
And finally, we zoomed all the way out to the stratosphere. We saw how these tiny micro-actions in a mundane cubicle interlock to build the macroeconomy, generating the surplus that funds scientific research, builds cities, and actively reduces poverty.
It is a profound, necessary shift in perspective. It demands that we stop treating leadership as a personality trait and start treating the science of management with the extreme reverence it deserves.
It really does. It raises the stakes of every interaction we have at work. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about the rest of your week.
Gives them something to think about.
If management is truly a socioeconomic tool that drives national development, if it is the invisible engine that builds housing, funds research, and reduces poverty, Is a bad boss just a simple business failure? Or is poor management actually a failure of our societal duty to one another?
That's a heavy question.
It is. The next time you are sitting at your desk or in a Zoom meeting, I want you to think back to that visceral feeling in your gut we talked about at the beginning. Look closely at your manager. Or if you are the one sitting in the big chair, look in the mirror.
Ask the hard question.
Ask yourself, are we just trying to hit our quarterly targets so we can clock out and go home? Or are we, through our patience, our vision, and our emotional control, actively building the human capital of the future?